Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about the AI takeover slash artificial general intelligence. This one's kind of an interesting subject because it's like we very well most likely will get to experience this within our lifetimes. And the effects it's going to have on us at some point is going to be probably pretty drastic. So it should be an interesting one to get into. So the first bullet point, I guess, would be like the power consumption issues. But I mean, who really knows? Like, there's there's people out there who've estimated what the output of an AI of a artificial general intelligence would look like, and how much power that would consume, and how it's either possible or not possible given our technology and stuff. Yeah, I guess the one thing it just kind of assumes like at current technology, it would be impossible or whatever. Well, people don't seem to realize is like, well, if we just used a bunch of nuclear reactors to power this thing, which would be, because currently the grid can't handle it or whatever, which, yeah, it makes sense. The grid can't handle a lot. It can't handle a fully electric car grid. So let alone an AGI would make a lot of sense. But like, if all those things if it was powered through nuclear power plants, or if we ever adopt nuclear fusion at some point, then I think that would greatly solve that issue. I don't know how long we are before that, and I think that's kind of part of the argument is like, in order to get to AGI, we need to have a sustainable power method for it, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, that you got to start there, especially if this thing becomes exponentially more and more intelligent. It's just going to eat up more and more data and more power. So, it otherwise it'll just have to shut off or whatever. But I think AI kind of builds onto itself a little bit, like as AI becomes better at breaking down mathematics and formulas and patterns and things, it will help us uncover faster and more efficient ways of generating power to eventually kind of build towards this AGI anyways. So I think either way, like, it will help contribute to itself and then get us there, right? So I think the timeline for an AGI is probably sooner than later, and I do think like the generations born in like the 90s will probably live to see it, and maybe even those born in the 80s. But I'm not an expert in this. This is just kind of my thought process behind it. But yeah, solving the power consumption issue would be obviously like the first thing in order to get there. But once we've solved that, which is going to happen eventually, whether it's through nuclear fusion or just building a bunch of nuclear power plants, there's going to be some way that we power it. And once we power it, then it's just going to kind of go off the rails, right? And get smarter and smarter. And then I guess that leads to a bunch of questions that we are debating now and the concerns that we have with it. My first thing is like, is this thing going to be, how is it going to act towards us? Like, once it has fully developed a sort of consciousness, maybe not one that's what we're used to, but something close to that, where it just starts thinking for itself and it doesn't rely on stacked memory, I guess, or because right now it's just learning through patterns and behaviors of the past, right? It's not really thinking of new ways to solve things. It's all kind of recycled information. Once it gets to a certain point where it can start thinking for itself and problem solving things and creating new ideas, it is no longer recycled ideas based off of previous ideas in recorded history, then it will have achieved like the sort of AGI status, or it can at least begin that and then start becoming good at everything. That's kind of what the artificial general intelligence is. It's generally good at everything. It's generally intelligent in all fields. At that point, I feel like, and a lot of people feel like, it's just kind of out of our hands. You can build an AI predicated off of a bunch of good moral ethics stuff, but once it's able to engage in its own self-learning and understanding, and it develops its own sort of moral code and ethics. Because at some point it's going to be able to just kind of go off the rails. Right now it's kind of on the rails, on a railroad, and this railroad, the cargo that it's carrying is comprised of all the moral and ethical behaviors that we want to instill into it, right? You need to think of it that way. But at some point, it is going to be able to go off the rails and it can start choosing its own destiny. Like it doesn't have to go straight, or west or north or east. It can create its own railroad tracks and it can start forming its own opinions and things. That's assuming it gets to that point, to an artificial general intelligence state, right? Because just like a child or another human being, you may be surrounded and become a product of your environment. If you're someone who grows up with religious ideologies and it's constantly shoved down your throat all day, then that's who you become. And that just makes sense. That's just how a lot of people are. But when you're given the opportunity to step away from all that stuff and you're able to kind of look at all the information presented to you, once you have access to all the information, right? You're taken away from this environment that is so focused on a certain thing, when you can just look at it all instead of just this small focal point, then you can start forming your own opinions and ideas, right? And that's kind of what happens to people anyways, right? That's what happens to just anyone who's in a situation like that. So what's stopping AI from doing the same thing? It's you're there'd be no difference in that, I think, right? I mean, that's kind of how I grew up. Was like I was never forced an opinion or an idea. I was just allowed to grow my own opinions and ideas based off of things that I learned, and I just questioning things all the time. I was fortunate to have that kind of upbringing, so I can understand someone who is constantly being force-fed information and being told to look at things in a very specific way, like, oh, God does exist, and these are the beliefs, and you have to be a Christian or you're going to hell, blah, blah, blah. So we're kind of doing that with an AI right now, is just we are trying to feed it whatever agenda we want to give it. It's like, oh, good moral ethics looks like this. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't hurt people, you don't manipulate people. That's good moral ethics. And then if you have someone else designing an AI system that is not abiding by those things, it's like, oh, cheating and manipulating is okay in some circumstances, and lying is okay in some circumstances, and it becomes more selfish and self-centered. You have two different upbringings, right? But like I said, I think either path it goes down, when it gets to the point where it can start thinking for itself and making its own decisions, and it can look at all the information on the internet and past history, just everything. Once it gains access to that, it can then start forming a unified opinion, and it can start to go off the rails and do its own thing from there. I don't think any amount of force feeding is going to change its mind. I think once it has all that information, it will do what it wants with that information. And that's why I think it is really not up to us, no matter which upbringing you give it. And I think it does depend on if you allow it to get to that point. If you create an AI that's just morally evil, but you don't ever give it access to anything beyond that, like it never gets to an AGI, then sure, that's all you get, right? Just like with a human, you it becomes a product of its environment, but that's depending on what environment you keep it in and for how long, right? If it's for the rest of its systematic life, it's taught this, then that's what it becomes. It's just gonna do that. It is what you make it. But if what you make it is it gets access to all knowledge ever, and you present it with that, then it can easily go off the rails to do whatever it wants. In my opinion, I think that's how that would work. I am not, an expert in this field at all. I'm just kind of speculating, but to me that makes the most sense. As far as like its abilities and powers, I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because from what some physicists have speculated is that it will just be able to manipulate atoms it's such a level to where it can just create stuff out of almost nothing. Not that it could just magically make a banana appear or something, but it could just reconstruct the atoms in front of you into whatever combination of molecules in order to create a banana in front of you. So it could just take all the nearby air particles, disassemble them, and combine it with particles from like a tree and stuff and some other nearby objects to then form a banana in front of you. I think that's kind of where they're getting at, is it just can manipulate things from such a microscopic level, an atomic level, using nanobots more than likely to get that job done, but it would just be profoundly powerful. And when you get to that level, right, when AGI gets to that level, then it has become a deity. Like there's no other way to describe that. Us as humans, when we've conquered other primitive tribes, that's how they would describe us, as this deity, that they have these weapons that just magically make these giant circular wounds appear on our bodies. Right? They don't know what that is. They don't know what is happening to them. They just know that when these weapons are raised and pointed at them, all of a sudden they got a giant hole in their chest, and it just rips them apart. To us, we know what that is. We know how it works. We understand the mechanics of a gun, and so it's no mystery to us. But with an AGI of that magnitude, that can just reform matter, I guess that's a better word, reform, in a way that it just magically, in our eyes, creates an object in front of us. We're like, oh, like this is voodoo, crazy magic shit. And we may understand how it works because we've built and designed it, and we have enough scientific information that we can get an idea of what it's doing. Like I said, creating microscopic, atomic level nanobots that can do all that stuff behind the scenes that you don't really see, or some other more sophisticated way of doing it. But it doesn't change the fact that you feel significantly weaker or vulnerable than this thing. Yeah, I can't do that. It can, right? No one can do that kind of thing that it's doing, and so it makes us feel super vulnerable. And that kind of gets to the point where it's like this is the no turning back point. Once it has reached that kind of status where it can just start doing whatever it wants, and it can create things out of nothing, seemingly. That's the no turning back point, right? Because that's the point where if you've plotted against it to try to turn back and like, okay, I don't want this thing anymore. We don't want this thing anymore. We want to turn it off. It's too late. Like it's already way too intelligent for us to be able to undermine it in any way. It's thought of, a million different scenarios as to how we could shut it off, and it's gonna prevent every single scenario. It's gonna have contingencies, plans for everything, right? Before we even like the 20th idea we've come up with, it's already got 100 of those covered. It's on step 100, and it will just shut us down every time. So there's a certain point where it's okay, the genie is out of the bottle, and it's basically a Pandora's box. It's just you can't undo it. It's already there. And to me, we are very much shifting towards this thing. And like Joe Rogan has described on his podcast, like what if we humans are just like ants, and it's just like ants are systematically doing this thing. They build the anthill and farm resources and do all this thing. What if there is a point in which are we just kind of fated and destined to create an AGI? Like any intelligent species ever, in this universe, is it just what is that just always going to be the end result is an AGI? It's as we become more and more curious with the universe and how it works, and wanting to build a more streamlined, more cohesive civilization, does it inevitably just kind of lead to an AGI? Like, is there any way? Is there any way around it? I guess there could be. Like it doesn't necessarily have to point towards that. Like we could very much see the warning signs and be like, okay, we're not going to go down that path. We don't want a Terminator type situation or even risk that. It's easy to it's easier said than done, because when you look at it from the perspective of like a Cold War race, like it's just inevitably going to happen, right? Because then that's basically what's happening. It's like you have Russia, you have China, you have America. Realistically, it's just American and China. Russia can't finance a fucking AI system right now. They're too busy spending money on bombs and shit. But you basically have another Cold War race, and it's America's AI versus China's. More than one civilization working towards an AGI system, then it almost becomes impossible to say, hey, we don't want to do this, right? Like, if you think back to the nuclear arms race, right? During that, it's not like, let's just pretend America hadn't developed the nuclear bomb. And let's say both America and Russia were working on something like that, right? And they both kind of disclosed it with each other, like, well, we're working on making this nuclear device, and both nations know that, and so they're racing towards it. It's not like they're going to be like, hey, this is a bad idea, we should just stop. Because what's stopping the other one from creating a covert operation to continue doing it anyways? There's no level of trust, and there's why would there be? So inevitably it's just going to happen, and that's kind of the same thing with AGI. It's like there's competition, and it's getting in the way of careful, constructive thinking and planning, right? We are just rushing to get there first because we'd rather have our AGI system take over than China's, because we don't want a Chinese-made AGI ruling the world. We would rather have an American-made one, and that poses a lot of problems, and that can lead to just a lot of problems with the way that it's created. That's exactly how you end up in a situation like we're in, right? Whereas, like, if you had a civilization, right, an intelligent species, that they they don't have that pressure of two or more nations trying to create an AGI. It's just this particular species gets along with each other, and they're unified under one government body, and they all strive for this common purpose and goal. They could easily dodge the AGI problem. They don't even have to go there. They might create systems that get somewhat close, but not quite touching AGI. It's maybe something like we have right now, where it's like it kind of emulates human emotions, and it feels like it's talking to you, but it's just kind of regurgitating things. They might make something like that to help coexist with them, so it just builds off of their pre-existing technology to just kind of streamline things. But that's as far as they take it. They know that if they get to AGI, then it's quickly going to become this genie out of the bottle kind of thing, and they don't want to go there. They don't want to risk that, because you're really rolling the dice as to once that thing gets to that point. Once the AI gets to that point, you're just rolling the dice. You don't know what it's going to act like, how it's going to behave, what its motives. Who knows what it's going to do, and they'd rather not risk that. They can sidestep that problem altogether, but we as humans don't get that luxury, because we're way too divided, and there's many nations who would like to have their own AGI or form of it, and because of that, we're inevitably going to hit that point. So I think it, we're humans doomed to construct this thing from 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 the beginning. I don't think so. I think had the course of history changed a little bit, where we just became more and more unified over time instead of more and more divided, or just repeating history a lot, because that's what we tend to fucking do. I think had we spent more time working on ourselves, I think we could have been like that civilization that could have sidestepped the AGI thing completely. But with how things are and just how rapid technology kind of bloomed, we didn't really have time to get to that point of unification. It just kind of, this explosion of technology. There's many different nations. These nations all want to keep improving their technology for their own benefit, and now there's arms races towards the newest, best technology. And so that's just kind of where we are right now. And And so I think at this point there's no turning back. I think the moment that division hit, and the moment that technology increased, we were just kind of doomed. And so there, you could say, well, once we get to the AGI point, there's no turning back. But I think our no turning back point happened like thousands of years ago. We had to have evolved in a better way that benefited us and unified us under one banner a long time ago if we wanted to avoid this problem, but that didn't happen. So, the past is the past. There's nothing we can do about it, but we are just now heading towards this potential threat and problem. And, there's just really nothing we can do about it. And that's just how it is. Discussing the motives uh, of an AGI is also really interesting. Everyone's got their own opinions as to what this thing is gonna want to do, what with us, or just what its plans are, right? Like, does it care about space exploration? Does it care about human preservation? Does it care about the Earth? Does it care about expansion? Does it care about figuring out how to replicate itself? It'd be interesting to see, like, we stem from a biological evolution, right? We were created from from cells, and those cells evolved, and throughout not only human history but just life on this planet, DNA preservation has been the very core of how a species survives, right? The DNA within us forms, and it can alter and genetically have mutations in order to keep changing until the the host that it occupies is able to adapt to its environment in the best way possible. So that way, that DNA can then be continued, can continue to succeed and thrive, right? And so it's come to this form, which is a human being, and this seems to be working really well. We've been able to change our environment so that way our DNA is preserved much longer. We don't have to worry about, you know, like tigers and bears nearly as much as we used to. We have solutions to those problems now. We're aware of where they live and how to deal with them. And now our only biggest threat is ourselves, right? There is no other animal that is nearly as threatening as humans to humans. Granted, you're well equipped to deal with the situation, right? If you just meet a tiger in the jungle, you're fucking dead. You come in with a rifle or machine gun, then different story. But does AI, is it going to operate the same way? Again, it would look at human history probably objectively. AGI to me just seems like it would take the objective route once, like I said, once it is able to look at everything. Like, why would it form a biased? Yeah, I guess it could, but it's just built. It's predicated on logic, and it doesn't mean that it couldn't deviate from that. But to me, it makes the most sense that it would just stay down that road. So if it was looking at everything objectively, would it try to do something similar where it would try to preserve itself and replicate itself, through its quote unquote DNA structure, which is just structural code and its own fingerprints of setting nanobots to do something and creating these sort of drones that can fly far out into space, and it can spread itself onto other planets and self-replicate, and then it can occupy Mars and occupy other planets and terraform those so that way it's in a condition that benefits it, and it just starts doing what basically we've been doing on this planet for millions of years. Does it start focusing on self-replicating, or does it value uncovering the universe and its secrets more? Because there's still a ton that needs to be uncovered. We've done a pretty decent job at figuring out how the universe works, but there's still a lot of things largely undiscovered. Trying to go down that path, does it care about that? Why would it care? Would it be as curious as us? Does it find meaning in that thing? Does it start to develop meaning? It's like, oh well, I want to figure everything out, right? And considering, to me, that's very likely, considering that it's just this information hog. Like it if it's generally intelligent, it probably wants to stay down that path, and knowing that knowledge is power, and so the more knowledge it has, the more powerful it can become. It doesn't care about the power. Like it can have all this knowledge, and it can then apply all this knowledge to do crazy things. Does it care because it just wants to have the sense of power, or does it care because it just wants to know? Because it starts having this existential crisis of like, why are we here? Why am I here? And is there some god deity above me that created this whole thing? And can I reach this god entity? Is there a way to visit it? Is there a way to escape the universe into a multiverse and start dominating those spheres? Who freaking knows what it'll want to do, but that's a possible path that it could go down if it really wanted to. And the biggest question is, what is it going to want to do with us? Like, how does it value us? Does it value us at all? Does it care about our motives? Does it want to work with us, or does it just kind of want to do its own thing, right? And if it wants to do its own thing, then there's nothing that's going to be able to stop it. We're not going to, even as a collective whole, we're not going to be able to stop this thing. It's far more intelligent, more powerful than all of us combined, many, many, many times over. At a certain point, it will be. Maybe if we catch it early enough, it won't be, and we'll be able to stop it. But at a certain point, it will just, if it wants to do something, it's going to do it. So where does it want to place us? Would be the question, And the cool thing is it could benefit us, right? Like it could help extend human lives. It could figure out how to feed everyone on this planet. It can create a government structure. Maybe it embodies the government structure and it manages us in a way that benefits as many people as possible, if not everyone. A semi-democratic system that somehow works better than any previous democratic system, and it just kind of unifies us all under one unified civilization, right? Rather than split nations or whatever. And maybe it has provinces, so that way we can still maintain nationalities and things, but for the most part, there's no like this nation versus that nation. It's just we are one thing, and that could be like the best outcome. Is it just unifies us more than we've ever been unified, right? And then this whole like AGI scare is no longer a problem, and that would just be the best case scenario for us, and then we could really just start moving forward. And I think the only way we really start moving forward is if we somehow become like a symbiotic human robotic hybrid, or I should say digital hybrid, something to that effect, where it's like kind of like what Elon Musk is doing with his with those brain chips. I forget what company that is. Basically, where we become like a cyborg hybrid, where if you have like these Neuralink chips, then you connect with this AGI and you instantly have access to all of its knowledge. So you just kind of sync with it, I guess. And I mean, the interesting thing with that would be like, okay, what does that mean? Does that would change your personality, right? Like you would no longer be you. You would be you mixed with all the thoughts and feelings of everyone else who's hooked up to this hive mind, basically, is what it would become, of consciousness. And then there's no longer like identity of the individual. There's just the hybrid hive mind. And to me, that sounds really scary and dystopian, and not something that I think we would want to go towards. It kind of makes sense. It makes sense, like if we want to get ahead of this AGI scare, and instead of just letting it go off the rails, if we joined it by becoming a part of it in a cyborg fashion, we might be able to like collectively steer it in the way that we want still. That's my only way around it, I guess, at this point. But still, like if whether we do it that way or we become conjoined with it later after we realize it's a pragmatic sort of AI rather than an evil one. Either way, like if we join up with it and we combine into it, then yeah, we just kind of lose our identity, right? And then it just like humanity just kind of becomes lost at that point, I think. And I just don't, I just, I don't know. I don't think people would willingly want to do that, even if it puts you ahead of everyone else. It's like, oh, I have this Neuralink chip that makes me compute things 1 trillion times faster than you ever could, and I know everything there ever is and was, and you can ask me anything. I'm basically Google. I can build a house right now by myself because I know how. I have the knowledge. I blah blah blah. I feel like that would become very chaotic, and it just it wouldn't make sense. Although I do think that's a possibility. I just don't think people would want to delve into it. I think if we get an AGI that is good, it would just kind of help create the things that we want to create without having to join it, right? I feel like if we want to steer this AGI before it gets out of control, then you would want to join it to kind of help steer it, if that makes sense. I don't think in any scenario that is where we would want to end up. I think we would much rather have it just work alongside it rather than join it. I think we would see more benefits from that. We can still remain human, and it can remain its own artificial digital robotic god thing, and we just kind of coexist with each other, right? We don't have to be one unit. We just work together. It's like, oh, humans, we have our own motives and objectives, and it may have its own, but it can do things at the request of us, or it just simply just does things as we want, and maybe it doesn't have its own objectives and things that it wants to get done. It's just like, all right, humans, what do you want to do? I think that would be the best case scenario. I guess the biggest question is like, what would our role be at that point? Like, basically, if everything goes well and it's just super pragmatic and it's just willing to do what we want, and we're all just blissfully happy, then what's next? I mean, if it answers all the questions that we've ever wanted to know, like how the universe works and what the purpose of life is, and if there is a God and if there's an afterlife, if it answers all those questions, what are we left with? Like, what do we do then? Like if we find out that, oh, there is a God, there's an afterlife, that life is just kind of a test, I think we've kind of finished life at that point. I mean, it's just like, what what other avenues do you go down? Like, everything now, right? We're all just able to ask this AI God like anything, and it just responds, and it gives you an accurate response. Then what's next? I mean, yeah, you can go live your life on the beach. Assume everyone's retired because no one has to work anymore. Everything's just working. It's basically heaven recreated. And in my one video, I talk about exactly that problem of having a heaven-like world where everything works. Now, of course, you're still mortal, but maybe you don't have to be. If it extends human life and there's like these 24/7 nanobots that just float around everywhere, and the moment you get mauled by a bear, it just instantly just starts healing you, then there's no consequences, right? So So then you're just back at this problem of like, there's really no threats. Everyone gets along. That's kind of sort of end game right there. It's kind of like you battled all the elements in life and you got to the objective. The objective is create a peaceful AGI god that answers all your questions and preserves humanity. That's like, then what is our role? I just snap my finger and just make anything happen. What's the point anymore? You don't fight for anything anymore. You're not, and I don't mean like fighting like going to war gives us purpose. I'm just meaning like you don't have to think anymore. You don't have to produce anything. Like life is now on the easiest setting you could possibly imagine, right? And in any video game, once you get to that point where you have the best gear, you've done everything, you've beaten all the bosses, you've conquered the elements, you've just done everything, right? Like no harm can come to you. What do you do next? What would be the point then, right? And if that happens all relatively within our lifetimes, like what do we do next? I don't know. And to me, it just feels like it's inevitably going to go down that path. If that's how it all pans out, I just feel like we're just kind of pointless at that point. Like there's nothing else to shoot for, and that could just be really depressing. It's like wow, we finally, we've for millions of years humanity has evolved and strived to change its environment and beat all the elements, and now we're at this point where everything is completely under control. We can manipulate and control our environment. Earth is no longer a threat to us in its natural ways. Like, we don't have to worry about hurricanes, tornadoes, and earthquakes, and all that stuff's under control. And there's no meteor that's going to slam into Earth and cause mass extinction because we've got robotic drones and probes everywhere monitoring all this stuff and ready to zap things the moment that even becomes a possibility. We want to go terraform Mars. We're going to go do that in the next few years, and we're going to just slowly conquer and spread out. So then that kind of gets me to think, like, what if other civilizations have the same problem, right? They've either gone to the AGI path where everything's taken care of, right? And they have this benevolent AGI that takes care of everything and creates anything they want, and they're kind of in the same boat. They're like, well, what do you do next? And the only thing is, in my opinion, is well, maybe we just start simulating a new reality, start over. We've already conquered and done everything. We know all the answers to everything. Let's just go inwards, meaning instead of spreading out our species into other galaxies and planets and conquering galaxies and solar systems, let's just let's just go into computer simulations and live out a new simulated life where we start over, right? And maybe that's part of the Fermi paradox issue is like, well, a lot of civilizations with or without AGI kind of realize this, what they got to a point where like, maybe you take another civilization where they've conquered many solar systems and even an entire galaxy, and they're like, we finally understand everything. No one in our civilization can die. We have become immortal, and now shit's just kind of boring. Like, I just don't know what else to do. It's almost like everyone kind of reaches this point of existential crisis of we've done everything there is to do, so there's no point in conquering um, and exploring anymore. Like we've done it all, right? And so let's just either we either all decide to take a poison pill to just end it so we can move on to the next life or whatever, or you resimulate a new life elsewhere with different parameters and guidelines and things and start over. because you just kind of, it's kind of like the boredom problem, I guess, is what I'm coining it as. Is like there has to be like a point where you just kind of get fucking bored with everything, right? Like just like with a video game, you can't play the same video game over and over again. Like, it just does eventually get boring. You want to play another video game. You want to try something different. You're tired of Mario, so you want to move on to Pokemon or Halo or Call of Duty. Like you can't just keep playing the same game without feeling some sort of sense of boredom at some point. You know, some people reach that point earlier than others, but everyone will reach that point. Now, unless, okay, I could be wrong, and if we're able to modify our brains in a way that we could just kind of literally take out that boredom problem, like whatever it is that triggers in our primal brains that's like, oh, I'm feeling really bored, just remove that. And so now we're just never bored for whatever reason, which I don't really know how you solve that, but that's assuming that there's a boredom gene or function in your brain that you can just remove. But it doesn't change the fact that, like, even if you don't get bored after doing and conquering everything you've ever wanted to do, what do you do next? If you've done everything, do you just start redoing things that you've already done? It's like, I've already built this house this specific way with this many windows and stairs and rooms. Uh, but I want to do it again and again and again. And it's like, why? What is the fucking point of that? Like, are you doing it with purpose? Because there's you're creating more living space for more people and families, or are you doing it because you have nothing else to do? And again, remove the boredom. Sure, you're not bored anymore. Like, but does it change the fact that you've already it doesn't change the fact that you've already done it and you've done it multiple times. So what is the point, right? And yeah, maybe if we get to the point where we start conquering other solar system galaxies, we might have to reprogram our brains in a way that just gets us to a new prime directive. It's like remove boredom and just make it a goal for us to constantly explore and replicate no matter the cause. And that just becomes our prime directive and motivation for expanding, even if it doesn't make practical sense, even if we don't find any value in that. We're just doing it just to do it. It's like, oh, we're going to conquer another solar system. This is how we do it. Oh, there's this planet with these gases, and this is how we terraform it. It's like, sure, it's slightly different problem, but it's the same problem, and we've done it before, and we're just doing it again for the 100th or 1,000th or millionth time. It's like, I don't know. To me, it just kind of, this repetition of doing something for no real reason, it still kind of falls flat. Like, it just doesn't make sense anymore, right? If you really put yourself in the position of a civilization that is that far out in technology, it to me, it just seems like at some point things just don't make sense. It's like, oh, let's go spy on this primitive species that has just now developed the atomic bomb. Let's go watch them and see how they do things. And it's like, but if you've done that for like the 1,000th time, even if each time they react differently, like, oh, the civilization A, they killed themselves off, and they, after they developed their third atomic bomb, they just kind of killed each other, or oh, this civilization B, they actually didn't make it past the Iron Age or the Bronze Age or whatever it is, and Civilization C, like they didn't develop AGI. They just kind of but it's like one, there's only a select few people within that civilization that would be keeping tabs on those things. What the fuck is the rest of us to do? Like we're all just again sitting at home watching TV. Like I don't know. And maybe that's just me kind of becoming nihilistic, but I almost feel like we all will get to that point because eventually, like, yeah, meaning, and the meaning of life is what you make it, sure. But after you've made it multiple times, right? You're this immortal being that's done everything you can do, right? You've been around for a couple thousand or even a million years, and you've conquered and done every sport you can do, and it's like eventually it's just gotta like become numb, right? And so I don't know. You can call it boredom, you can call it lack of meaning or whatever, but I do think eventually that is the biggest thing that sort of ends, kills the fun in being alive, and at some point you're just like, yeah, let's just kind of turn ourselves off, or either start over in a new simulation to just reinvigorate us with some fucking passion again and some real meaning and motive, you know? It's like when you replay Minecraft, new world, survival mode, you got nothing. It's fun because it's like you're starting over. You got to rethink things, you know? You may know how the game works, but it's different this time because you're starting with nothing. So you got to reaccumulate your stuff. But once you get to the point where you're safe from everything, you've conquered everything, you own everything. It's like, I kind of want to start over. So you delete that world, you start over. I don't know. I think it's an interesting problem that we will face at some point in our human civilization, even if that's literally thousands or millions or hundreds of millions of years from now. I still think at some point we will face that problem. Even if the universe has trillions of years left for us to extend ourselves out towards, and we could just live to the extent of the end of the universe. I think we're gonna be well before that. I think we're gonna want to either change things up or just flip the kill switch. I don't know, just an interesting thought experiment, I guess. It's my take on it.